welcome everybody to the webinar today, The Power of the Unconscious Mind. So really pleased you could join us for this session, and delighted that Jani is with us as well. And I'll introduce Jani in a moment, but as always, just some housekeeping. So you're in listen only mode. Really invite you to use the chat panel as we're working through today's session. So please feel free to add any reflections or questions on the chat panel, just so we can try and make it some interaction during this session. Would always encourage you to close down any open applications, because sometimes this affects the transmission speed. So closing down web browser, etc. Of course, it helps with presence as well. And I would always encourage you to have a pen and paper handy for these sessions as well. So really delighted to be with Jani this afternoon for the next 30 minutes for this webinar. So for those who haven't connected with Jani before, Jani is one of our faculty team. She teaches on our diploma program, works as an executive coach. So I believe you're practicing well over 20 years now, Jani. We've known each other for a long time as well. But also Jani sort of specializes with NLP work as well, and as an NLP trainer. So it's one of the reasons why I wanted Jani in conversation today to talk about this topic, really around sort of habit and behavior change, just so we can hear some experiences and some, I suppose, practical ways of supporting clients to make shifts in their behavior as well. So welcome to the session, Jani. I just wondered as a start, I'm doing this with all the panelists at the moment, but perhaps if you're okay, just perhaps giving us a bit of background in terms of how you got to be where you are now in terms of your coaching practice. So around background.
Okay, how I got to be here. I studied an MBA over 20 years ago, and as part of that I chose a syllabus called Creative Management, which was one of the better decisions I've made in my life. And as part of that, one of the things that they introduced to us was NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and I just got really curious about it and interested in it, and then went off and did my practitioner, my master practitioner, and various other trainings. Went to the States and did my trainer's training over there, and from there I started working purely in NLP training, then got some coaching, and my business kind of just grew from there, really. So I've been one-on-one work and doing faculty for yourself and my own business as well. Yeah, so and I'm very fortunate because I love what I do. Yeah, I think that's a potted history. Yeah.
Thanks, Jani. Thank you. And I mean, when I think back to our connection and the leaders you were working with in the organization that I was supporting, and you know, if ever there was a leader that wanted to make shifts in their behavior, you know, I know a lot of the work in the past that I've connected with you around has been to support people around confidence, etc. And just to say to the group, there is another recording of Jani talking about working with coaches to develop confidence on our YouTube channel. Today, really want to focus on this idea of, we called it the power of the unconscious mind. And so let's just start there, perhaps, with thinking about the clients you work with, and I suppose, you know, what's important about that, you know?
I think, I mean, I obviously, not all of my clients come to me because they're recommended because of something around self-belief or confidence, but those that are, I think where I come from is that they're all successful. They're all, you know, very, you know, usually senior leaders, and sometimes there's something getting in their way. And if they could have fixed it logically and rationally, you know, using the resources that they have, they would have done. They've got a bit stuck. They kind of got in their own way. And that's where I think the power of the unconscious mind comes in that it's something that's going on underneath the surface, that they're just not aware of. I know we use the metaphor of the iceberg. My mind went blank there. The iceberg, and you know, we all know that from an iceberg, there's a bit that we can see above the water, but there's a huge amount of mass that sits underneath the water, and that's the sort of metaphor I used for the unconscious. So what we're consciously aware of is just what's happening in present moment, you know, and that could be anything from, you know, five to seven chunks of information. So just really what's going on currently for us that we're paying attention to. And when a client comes that perhaps there's something they've been stuck on for a while, it's usually because there's all the things that are going on underneath the surface. There's something there that they're just not aware of that's getting in their way. So it could be an old belief, it could be something they're assuming about something. There's lots of things that could be going on for them that they're just not aware of. And I think that's where NLP comes into getting them to think about what they're thinking and what their physiology is, where they're focusing their attention. All that sort of comes together. And I kind of see myself almost as a bit of a detective, because we leak information when we don't realize it. And so I'm sort of looking for what I technically call the moments, you know, where you'll just see someone either take a sort of, you know, breathing will shift, you know, so they'll go from looking relaxed and happy and confident to there'll be just a shift in the physiology. And that's sort of my clue that, I'm curious, what's happening here? You know, what were you saying to yourself at that moment? What were you picturing? Which is usually a question that gets the answer, well, I wasn't picturing anything. And I'll say, yeah, and if you were, what was it? And then we'll get great detail about what's going on inside their own minds that they're just not aware of. It's not in their conscious awareness, and that's where we're looking to make a change. And so I think, yeah, that's the power of it, is that it's something that most people aren't aware of what's going on beneath the surface, and it's raising their awareness in that area.
Mm. And you sort of reflect back a couple of things, you know, paying attention to like physiological sort of shift that you're sort of seeing as the coach is speaking to you, but also helping them then tune into, I suppose, their internal map in terms of dialogue or what they're seeing, etc. So when you're working with a client and perhaps they are talking to you about perhaps some behavior they want to make a change with, or something else they want to shift, tell us a bit about your approach, if that's okay, in terms of what you're doing as you're working with them.
Initially, one of my first questions to them will be, okay, so you know, this is where you currently are, so tell me about what you want to achieve from this. You know, what brought you here for coaching? What is it that you want to shift? How do you want to be different as a result of our coaching? And that can sometimes lead to an interesting conversation, because often when you ask people what they want, they'll start off maybe perhaps telling you, or for some people that can be a real challenge. They're so used to thinking about what they don't want that that's where their thinking goes. And we know in terms of neuroscience now that, you know, in terms of the neural pathways, the language we choose is very impactful. So, you know, I use a lot of stories when I'm working because I think it brings it to life a bit. But a female leader I was working with, and we started talking about what she wanted from coaching. And she wanted to be a more impactful leader. She wanted to be more creative, and she wanted to be more dynamic. And then, of course, what she didn't want starts to creep in. And that's the bit where the power can be, because then she was saying, you know, she didn't want to be bossy. A female one. She didn't want to be seen as bossy. She didn't want to be seen as demanding. She didn't want to be seen as pushy. So then, if you think about it, the neural pathways for each of those words are very powerful. And it's about then getting beneath the surface about, okay, so if you don't want to be pushy, so how do you want to be? And really starting to reframe that and almost eliminate what they don't want. Because when we focus on what we don't want, we just get more of it. So it's about so the first part might be what language are they using, and helping them get some clarity and clean up their language. So for themselves internally as well as externally, because when we talk about how we want to be, so when she was saying she wants to be a dynamic leader, then, you know, what's the image that she's got in her mind's eye when she thinks about that? How does she see herself being dynamic? And often, you know, the picture isn't very clear because the knots where she doesn't want to be. She didn't want to be seen as pushy or bossy. Then that kind of muddies the water. So it's really sort of clearing up that as a sort of starting point. You know, how are they talking to themselves about this? What's the language they're using internally about how they want to be, and what are the pictures that are supporting that as well? So I'm sort of curious about that. And then from there, I'm often getting them as a starting point. It's about what are they focusing on, what's their physiology, and what are they thinking about. So those sort of three sort of bullet points, as it were. So often I will get someone to stand, I'll get them to put a line on the floor, sort of from 0 to 10. And I'll say, okay, in terms of being, I'll use a leadership example. So if you are starting off, looking about how you want to be as a leader in terms of being dynamic and creative, and we've got 0 being you're not at all dynamic and creative, and 10 you're being everything you want to be, go and stand on that line where you would place yourself now. And then it's about raising their awareness about what's going on for them there. As you stand there, we can give feedback. You notice their posture. How are they standing? I notice that your shoulders are, or I notice that your, perhaps sometimes their feet for women can turn inwards. And you just notice that, and you can give them that awareness and sort of, so asking them, so when you're standing here, what is your focus? What are you assuming about yourself? What are you assuming about the world around you, the people you're working with? What's going on for you? What are you saying to yourself now? What's the language that you're using internally? And what tone of voice is it in? And sometimes the strange question can be, is it your voice that's in your head, or is it someone else's you're hearing? Sometimes I've had someone who said when they were being really self-critical, it was their headmistress's voice tone that came in then, but they weren't aware of it until you start asking those questions, and they kind of go, oh, that's really weird. Like, it's perhaps not very helpful, is it? No, it's not helpful at all. Okay, so that might be something we might want to change. And then so wherever they've placed themselves on that scale, I'll get them to stand there and sort of raise their awareness about what they're doing and what's happening for them. And then I'll ask them to move up the scale. So if they've stayed on a 6, I'll say, okay, so now when you're ready, move to a 7. And just what do you notice is different here? What are you aware of? What are you sensing? What are you hearing? So starting to raise their awareness there, and then moving them up to an 8 or a 9. And often I find people can be resistant to moving to a 10. So often I'll use a 9 out of 9 because somehow that seems to sit more comfortably than being a 10 out of 10. But there, so what do they notice? What's different here? And you'll always see a shift in their physiology. You'll notice I always notice their chin. Often when they're lower down the scale, their physiology, their chin will be down. And as they start to move up, their posture changes and their chin comes up, and they're sort of looking more around them. They're looking outward. Sometimes when they're lower down the scale, their focus of attention is all internal. So it's all about, it's all about them, and they're not really aware of other people. So it's that sort of using that as a starting point as well can be really give them real insights into how they're doing what they're doing. How are they talking themselves out of something? Or, the opposite of that is, well, how can you talk yourself into it? So yes, I use that as a nice sort of tool just to sort of get the dialogue and get them thinking about what they're doing differently.
Yeah, no, great, thanks. So a sense of like that embodied scale, actually getting them to stand at that position and really exploring, like you said, in terms of their internal patterns, but also what you're experiencing as the coach externally as they're moving up that scale towards a 9 out of 9. So go on.
I was going to say, and also that awareness gives them resources. So they might notice that they've got a different physiology, or they might be saying something to themselves or nothing at all. And that then becomes a resource that they can take with them into all different parts of their lives, not just the one, it generalizes, which is the great thing. Our brains are really good at doing that. When it gets a resource, we generalize it. So they can it's that self-awareness that makes the change. As opposed to giving them tools and techniques to do. It's about them really embodying the change and being aware of when they're doing it well, how are they doing it? It's almost like the jigsaw puzzle, what are the bits that are missing when they're not being at their best?
Yeah, thanks, Jani. And I suppose from, our method around transformation is really they experience that embodied shift in the session. So they're able to access it outside. And just to add in, I always find getting the coachee to connect to their breath in terms of where they're breathing as they stand in those different spaces is so powerful as well. So what else? We do this embodied scale to give them a sense, raising their awareness about where they see themselves now, helping them unpick in terms of what's helping them be more resourceful in terms of what they want rather than what they don't want. What else?
And then if we think about someone setting new habits, it was quite fortuitous. I had a phone call with a friend just a couple of days ago, and we were just catching up and chatting. And since lockdown, he decided he was going to redo his bathroom. And so he's done a lot of the work. And as we were talking, he's also a coach, which helps the conversation. And we were chatting about it, and he said, oh, I've got my bathroom taps. I finally got them in and working. And they're wonderful. He said, I know it's a little thing, but God, they're so good. They're lovely. And he was raving about them. And I said, oh, well done. And he said, yeah. And then his whole physiology just went, ugh. And he said, yeah, but I've got to put the bathroom cabinet on next. Oh, it's going to be really hard. You know, I just keep putting it off every day. I think, oh, I should do that. I really should do it. And I said, doesn't sound like you're doing it. And he went, no. And I said, no. And I said, really curious, you know, I'm just thinking about, you know, how you were when you told me about how great your bathroom taps were and the different energy you have. And he's like, yeah. And he said, and then he started laughing because he's a coach and he got it. And he said, oh, and he said, but of course, you know, I didn't want to do the taps either. I talked myself out of that for a couple of weeks because I thought it was going to be difficult. You know, I'm going to get all messy and dirty, and it's going to be really tight fit, and it's going to be. And I said, so all those pictures that you were making inside your head were really helpful. And he went, yeah, okay. And I said, and obviously what you were saying to yourself, that it was going to be hard and difficult, and you didn't want to do it. And he's like, no, yeah, right. I said, so what might be the learning in terms of what you're going to do with your bathroom cabinet? And he's like, oh, okay, yes, okay, yes. And he said, yeah, I could talk to myself differently. I could make different pictures. I could see what it's going to look like when it's all finished, because it will look really nice, a really nice bathroom cabinet. And I said, oh, how good will it look? Oh, it'll look really good. With your new taps, it'll look really nice. Oh, yeah, it'll look really nice. And then I can put the floor down, then it'll be finished. Oh, how good would that be? You know, so what we're doing then is changing the picture inside his head, because suddenly he's got the picture of the end. You know, it's like Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind. You know, what is it that you want to achieve? And when you focus on that, it changes your state. And then it changes what you're saying to yourself. So I think pictures are really important, and we're not normally aware of them until you ask someone. And then they kind of go, okay, yeah, I'm thinking about this. And normally how we put ourselves off, how we talk ourselves out of it, is that we will focus on the process of doing it. You know, someone doing the dishes, you know, I don't know if your kids are good, you know, I'm a dishwasher now, but emptying the dishwasher, mine are older, you know, emptying the dishwasher, oh, do I have to do it? Oh, and they're focused on the actual act of doing it. Actually, I don't suppose they care what it looks like afterwards. That's probably me. But I've got this image of what it'll look like at the end, and it's kind of like, oh, that'll be nice, you know. So that's the kind of how we naturally motivate ourselves, is what we do. We think about how it's going to be and what we're going to get by doing it. But when we're stuck, it's usually because we're focusing on the process and just making a picture that's not very helpful, and talking to ourselves in a way that's not particularly helpful either. So in terms of, you know, installing that new habit, and actually it was really interesting in preparation for doing this, I, like probably a lot of other people, have instigated a fitness habit that's a bit more regular than it was prior to lockdown, because we've got a bit more time. So every morning I'm doing this class at 8 o'clock, and I found, having sort of thinking about what I was going to talk about last Friday, and there was a class that's every morning, Monday to Saturday, and Friday night, as I was going to sleep and I was thinking about this, and then I suddenly thought about my class and thought, that's interesting. And I don't really think about it very positively. And I just sort of went through this and thought, so why am I doing this class? And I thought, because I want to be stronger, I want to be fitter. You know, and I had then images were coming in of me being stronger and fitter, because one of the things we do is a dead man burpee, which is just quite challenging for me. But it was like, that's my goal. I want to be able to see myself doing the dead man burpee as easily as my daughter can do it. So that was the image I had in my mind. And it wasn't until earlier today I suddenly realised my class on Saturday and Monday this morning were very different. I had a very different experience. I was actually looking forward to it. And I was noticing what was new and different, which I think is another good strategy when we're implementing a new habit. We can sometimes get a bit stuck because we don't see the results quickly as we might want, and we can get a bit stuck on that's not working and that's not, you know. But actually, if we notice what's new and different each day, it just gives us a different perspective, which can be really motivating. So I noticed, having sort of thought about what I was going to teach, or not teach, but what I was going to talk about with you on this webinar, it actually impacted me. And I know this stuff, but we can all forget to do it at times. And we can all get in our own way, talk ourselves out of it. Don't want to do that class, it's Saturday morning. I'm tired, I had a late night, I had a glass of wine last night. Oh, maybe I should. But suddenly, when I thought about how I wanted it to be and how I wanted to be, the class went really well.
And what I'm reflecting back is, and the choice that creates in the client, you know, when they understand that in a dialogue, they understand those pictures, they can choose in terms of where they are paying attention. So that sort of sense of responsiveness that comes from that. So please, I'm just going to pause and just see for the group. I've got a couple of other questions I want to build on from what you've shared, but just if there are any questions coming through from anyone, you know, in terms of as you're listening, please feel free to add those to the chat panel just so I can bring them into the conversation. But you're sort of starting to touch on to visualization in a way, Jani, in terms of creating a picture of what I want, you know, and noticing as I go along, you know, those changes that are happening. So perhaps just, if it's okay, just talk a bit more about the visualization.
The visualization is really interesting because we know now from neuroscience, I mean, visualization and forward thinking about something is one of the key things from NLP. So I've used visualization for years. And now we know from neuroscience that actually our brain isn't able to tell the difference. In terms of the neural pathways that light up, when we're actually doing something, the neural pathway lights up. But if we're actually thinking in detail about doing it, so we're not actually physically moving, the same neural pathway lights up, which I think is really interesting in terms of, I'd like to do a study of this, get a group of people together and think, because we know there's discussion about how many times it takes to bring in to make a new habit sustainable, that you're doing it without thinking about it. And I'm curious as to if we use visualization, can we ingrain that habit much quicker? So we don't actually physically have to do something 60 times, we can actually visualize it 60 times, and what would be the impact of that? But I just saw someone said about adapting new techniques to using Zoom. So I was working with a client on Friday afternoon, and we were discussing about something he wanted to, it was about working from home actually, and he was finding the challenge of stepping away from the computer and sort of work-life balance, being able to separate the two. And we were talking about that, and he was coming up with strategies about what he could do in order to make that transition, so to make it a clean transition. And so one of the things I've got him to do was to visualize it. And I said, okay, so the things you've just said, I want you to see yourself doing that now. And that's an important point, I'll just stop myself there. In terms of visualization, I think it's really important to realize that when we're visualizing, if I ask you all now to think about your front door and what it looks like, and as you walk in through the front door, what do you see? I'm sure all of you have got a vague picture, and it might not be so clear, it might be a bit hazy, it might not be as bright. It's not like looking at a picture of, you know, what you can currently see right in front of you. So it's that, if it was as clear as it is when we're actually seeing it, there'd be a bit of a problem there for our brains. We wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So it is that the image that might come and go, it might be phasey, and that's absolutely fine when we're visualizing. So for him, he ran through in his mind, he closed his eyes and he ran through in his mind's eye, you know, what he was going to do at the end of the day in order to make that transition. And I saw him smile as he was doing it. And he came back out, you know, after a minute or two, and I said, I'm curious, what was the smile about? And he said, well, I realized there was one thing I wasn't doing, and I thought, now I need to add that in. And he said, and then I thought about something else I could add in. So actually, by doing that visualization, it really brought it to life for him, and it meant he could really fine tune that. So, you know, you can do that as easy with someone face to face as you can do over Zoom. So using the visualization about, you know, what is it you want? So really focusing on what you want as opposed to what you don't want. And then thinking about it and visualizing that in your mind's eye, I think is a really powerful tool, and I use that a lot. And then I go back to my friend with the bathroom, you know, when he suddenly had the picture of his, you know, bathroom cabinet being fitted and then his floor being fitted, then it suddenly motivated him and spurred him on.
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
Yeah, visualization is very important.
Thanks, Jani. And I think, you know, working online as well, we just need to be sensitive and contract with the coachee, because it may be if they're moving, we may not be able to see them. So again, you know, feel free to move to a place in a room that represents 5 out of 10. I'm conscious I can't see you, so some of my questions may be a bit all times. So I'm going to be checking in with you about how this is landing as we work through this exercise, or if they're sitting with their eyes closed, because you know, for some of my clients, them closing their eyes helps them visualize. Again, we just be mindful of that. So I'm conscious that I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. So just to say that if any of our signal drops, you know, just stay with the exercise, and I'll rejoin you as soon as I can, you know, either by phone or back. We just need to make it safe for them, I think.
And I think that's part of the contracting. In fact, I had a conversation with a colleague about exactly this topic the other day. And what we were saying, it was about how she was going to add more into her contracting around, because we all, get coaches moving around. And it was sort of saying to them, I might ask you to move around and you don't have to worry if I can see you or not. As long as I can hear you, that's all I need, because then I'll probably ask more questions than I might do. And I'll be asking you for what's going on for you now. So what's happening now? What's happening now? So I might actually repeat that a lot more than I might do for a face-to-face. But if you set that up in the contracting, then it feels safe for them. And it's part of setting their expectations about what they can expect.
Thanks, Jani. I've seen a question come through from Linda saying, be really interested to know how Jani deals with a negative chimp. Is it visualization that is the key?
It's dependent. Is the negative chimp, is it the visualization, or is it the internal dialogue? What's having the biggest impact? So it's raising someone's awareness. Is it, for some people, they don't realize, but they've got a really strong internal critic. And when you raise an awareness about that, then it's actually, there's lots of different techniques of dealing with it. From sometimes changing the voice tone to making it a really silly voice tone. I've got someone who shouts loudly inside his head and tells the critic to shut up. Other people use songs, so they have a favorite song that really motivates them, and then when they're aware, it's that, how do you break the pattern? And they'll sing that song inside their head. Some people will get up and move. Before I did my call, this call, I went down to get myself some water, and I sort of do some movement. So I did some, jumping jacks just for 30 seconds to kind of, because I've been sitting in front of a Zoom for a while. So I did that, and my husband was laughing, and he said, "Oh, we always used to do that before we were going in to see clients. It would be like, okay, how do you get in your best?" So it's being creative. What's going to work for you in that moment that's going to get rid of the chimp.
And from Rachel, what do you typically reach for, Jani, when you're working with someone who's distinctly non-visual?
Then it's about being curious about, is it language they're using? Are they much more aware of their language? Is it voice tone? Is it their physiology? What's going on for them as they stand in front of you? And it's really interesting, I think, for people who say they're non-visual. I don't believe that. That's not good. Yeah, I challenge that, I would say, because in fact the friend who I mentioned, who's a coach as well and an NLP coach, and his preferred sense is auditory, and he's always sort of said, no, visualization doesn't work for me. And it's like, that's interesting. But whenever he describes something to me, and I'll say, and that's interesting what you're seeing at the moment, and he'll go, and he always laughs, and he's like, and actually it usually tells me to get lost. But so I would say stay with it and sort of say, I know you don't think you've seen anything at the moment, but if you were, what do you think it might be? So it's doing it with that sort of curiosity and wondering and just being curious about it for them. What else might be going on for them? What are you aware of in your body? What sensations are you aware of? What are you aware of in terms of what you're saying to yourself? So it's exploring with them.
Thanks, Jani. And I'm just conscious of time, but another reflection from Izzy, any advice on how to use NLP with a client who isn't particularly open or talkative?
I think one of the big things of NLP is about building rapport. So I have one of the clients I worked with that I initially found challenging, who wasn't particularly talkative and actually really liked to reflect. And so it was being aware of that. So adjusting my style of how I was being with him, so that giving him the space to think, and actually asking the question about how he liked to work. And he said, well, I really like to sort of go away and think about what we've discussed, and come back and then bring it back to the next session. So that felt different to me. That was more challenging for me to do, but just respecting that and becoming, in terms of rapport, it's becoming a bit more like the person opposite you. So if that's the way they like to work, then just adjusting your style and temperament in order to do that.
Thank you, Jani. Thank you. And I just want to throw in another reflection around working online. I think working online gives us an added value where we can record elements of the session. Often, so if we are doing a visualization exercise with the client, we can record it and send them the recording afterwards so they can re-listen to the experience again. I think it'd be so powerful just to reinforce it in that way as well. So Jani, we're sort of running out of time. Just anything else you really want to share with the group in terms of just this topic around, habit, behavioural change?
I think the one question I often ask at the beginning is, what's possible is this possible? Are you able to do it? And do you deserve to do it? And I think sometimes it's the third one that can sometimes throw up some, stuff that's sitting in the unconscious that then you raise their awareness of, oh, that's not sitting comfortably. And then you can sort of have a discussion around about what's going on for them.
Yeah, sure. I can see a really interesting question just come through from Catherine. So really sorry, we're going to sort of have to pull things to a close because we're at time. Jani, really appreciate your reflection today, and I hope that was useful for the people listening. Just some additional reflections around supporting clients, who are working to change habits and behaviour. So thanks for joining. I really hope that was useful.